Good afternoon, everybody. I think I'm going to start 2 minutes early. As my colleagues know, I like to take time and I talk too much, way too often. So if it starts dragging, just nod your head a few times and I'll make sure to keep it shorter. Welcome, everybody. I'm really glad that you're all here. Really excited about this talk that I'm about to have. We're talking about everything we've seen in the first half of 2025 of this year. How both us as defenders, but also cybercriminals are evolving in a year that's quite exciting, to be honest. I hope that everybody can hear me properly. Let's go. Thank you. Thank you very much for your help. So, first of all, this is what I'm mainly talking about. I'm talking about our threat intel report from the first half year of 2025, and also what we at ESET, but in the Netherlands, have done around the NATO Summit. But first of all, I'm curious who knows a bit about gaming. Are there any people over here that like gaming? Hands up if you do. Okay, that's enough for me. So there's actually quite some comparisons to be taken from what happens in the cybercriminal part of the world, and you can compare it to what's happening in gaming. Because the last half year, well, we've seen that threat actors have been targeting each other. Ransomware groups have been fighting a deathmatch, so to speak. Free for all, everybody goes after one another. But also, we see that our criminal enforcement is also targeting them as well. They're the hunters, and the cybercriminals are becoming the hunted, which is a good thing. Let me start off by talking about what we see over here. Everybody knows captchas, right? The kind of things that you do to prove that you're actually not a robot, that you're human. And actually, me personally, I'm sick and tired of filling out these parts where you have to show, okay, this is a traffic light or this is a bike, and please confirm that you do so, or you have to fix this simple puzzle, or you have to type in those words, usually helping the big tech companies learn their systems, their AI systems in becoming better. But we are so used to performing these tasks for computers that cybercriminals are seeing this as well. And the thing that they see that... So, cybercriminals have taken their interest in this as well, and they're turning captchas into a weapon. They're creating vague versions of the annoying process of proving you're not a robot. And to prove that you're not a robot, you first have to click, for instance, on this big blue button in the middle of the screen. Okay, so the reCAPTCHA, right? So you're clicking on the blue thing to prove you're not a robot. I'll start and finish this up as soon as I can, right? So after you click on this, a couple of things happens. You have to follow 3 simple instructions. You have to press the Windows R button, press the paste shortcut Ctrl-V, everybody knows that one, and you have to press Enter. I'm sorry, the screen is not what it's actually supposed to show, but forgive me for that one. But as you press Enter, as you've pasted something, that's when you've triggered a malware infection by executing a PowerShell command copied onto your clipboard. That command was actually copied to your clipboard when you clicked the big blue button that we just saw, where you were supposed to prove that you're not a robot, but that's where you messed up, basically. What follows is this, right? Click. The first thing you do is you click, you paste, etc., and then a download of a harmful HTA file that contains a JavaScript, and that exploits a legitimate system operating tool to execute. And from there on, there are additional PowerShell scripts that are loaded and run on your system until, for example, and this is just an example, an Infostealer unpacks into your system memory, right? The malware will then steal your data and send that data to the attacker service. So this is basically how this thing works. This is highly effective, as you can see in this graph, because according to ESET telemetry, this threat basically didn't exist up until a year ago. And today it's the number 2 threat globally, with a growth of over 500% in the past 6 months. Alarming numbers. And the bad news is that this fake captcha, as we call this, is just an example of new social engineering technique called click fix. Remember that name. It comes from the concept that by clicking on something and following several instructions, you fix an issue that's presented by the attacker. And you can encounter all types of fake warnings almost everywhere. Email attachments, links in messages that you receive from people that you do not know, or malicious and even compromised legitimate-looking websites. Websites that appear to be legitimate but provide you with these warnings. The content copied through your clipboard is in most cases a PowerShell command or curl command and can lead to any number of intermediate steps. And it always finishes with the delivery of a final payload, which can be either an info stealer, ransomware, remote access trojans, backdoors, stuff like that. And ClickFix isn't just used by cybercriminals. We also see sophisticated state-sponsored groups, one of which we describe in detail in one of our APT reports, one of the APT reports that ESET publishes. And the North Koreans, highlighted in red, everybody knows where North Korea is, obviously, but trying to help people out that don't. They were among the first to adopt the trend, and a group called Deceptive Development is onto that. They are mostly financially motivated, like a lot of North Korean APTs. Every dollar that they earn through this process goes back to the regime to finance their rocket program, basically. They use the trick in fake development recruitment campaigns to target their victims' employers, a part of North Korean IT worker trends. And those are documented not just by us, but by a lot of IT researchers all over the globe. They use fake recruitment platforms, imitating legitimate services, and job applicants are told that their camera doesn't work. That's an interesting one, right? Your camera doesn't work, your microphone doesn't work, but we can fix this. Here's your ClickFix. You just have to copy the provided command into your clipboard and run it in your device's command line, and that'll fix your problem, right? Wrong. It's also distributed as a solution to fabricated issues posted as comments on their well-known projects on GitHub. You see it in the bottom. Once again, a thing that they really thought well about. It's a very well-designed technique, obviously, because we're all used to CAPTCHAs and we do as we're told, right? Everybody fixes the problem, tries to fix the puzzle, or in this case, perhaps even copy and paste those commands. And for users unfamiliar with PowerShell commands, this is basically too technical to understand, and that's the problem. It's too technical to understand, and it's really easy to perform these tasks. And that is a sweet spot, a really, really important sweet spot that will be exploited basically up until there's a time that there will be built-in warning in our operating systems, which will take some time, I'm afraid. I want to move on to a completely different game, and you see the NFC logo already. We all love things that make our lives easier, am I right? And everybody loves paying with their Apple Watch. Press the button 3 times, perhaps use your Face ID on your phone, and you tap to pay, right? It's really easy, but also NFC is a bit more sophisticated and a bit better protected than let's say a PIN or something else, but it's still something that can be used in bad ways. NFC is a safer alternative, basically, but it's not bulletproof. And this was shown by the German students at the Technical University of Darmstadt, I hope I pronounced that correct, who published NFC Gate on GitHub. And NFC Gate basically is a tool that captures the NFC traffic from apps, passes it along or relays it to other devices and mimics it or replays that data, which is a useful utility for testing and academic research, but also very useful for attackers. They took notice and they used NFC Gate for their own custom malware. The first one we saw last year was used in the wild, and it was called Ngate. And they combined this NFC Gate with social engineering and phishing. The attackers created a novel attack vector allowing them to remotely withdraw cash from victims' accounts via ATM, like the machine that we all use to take our money from. Even, I mean, I don't do that often, but people obviously still do in other parts of the country, in other parts of the world. Ngate obviously is inspired other criminals to use that as well, and one notable example got found by Threat Fabric, and it's called GhostStep. The attackers use phishing and social engineering to trick users out of their cards, their card details, and their one-time passcodes, and register these stolen cards on attackers' devices. And where NFC comes to play is that they don't use their own device for the payment or the withdrawal from an actual ATM to avoid being traced. They use this academic NFC gate to relay the card data to the devices of a money mule. And this is interesting because the cybercriminal cannot be touched if you use a money mule. And they can make the fraudulent contactless payments anywhere in the world, basically buying TVs or withdrawing money. This is actually heavily promoted by several Chinese actors. These NFC threats originally popped up mostly in Central and Eastern Europe, but in the first half of this year, it expanded their reach to Russia, Germany, and the US basically, and Chile as well. With this growing number of NFC threats, we can obviously see a real obvious trend. It hasn't been around that long yet, and during the last half of 2024, it was only one detection per week. But on the brink of this summer, the detection has grown to dozens per week. And dozens per week doesn't strike me as a huge number, but it shows how quickly criminals evolve. And there's already malware as a service on the market that actually uses these vulnerabilities. It's a 35 times increase. So I actually promised to dive into ransomware a bit and gaming. Like I said, it's been a true free-for-all in the first half of 2025. And in 2024, we reported that, or reported attacks grown by 15% to an astonishing more than 5,000 attacks in general incidents. And things look even worse when we consider the number of ransomware operators or gangs, because that has jumped by 43%, and there's about 96 gangs at the moment. There's a real splintering in the ransomware scene as we see it at this moment. But there's also positive numbers, because the actual there's a decrease in the profit that these ransomware gangs make. The total amount of ransom payments has dropped by more than a third to $813 million, which is quite a lot, but it's not as much as it has been in the past few years. So that's, I guess it's a bit reassuring. And I want to talk about a misconception, basically, because there's a lot of companies. A few of my friends are entrepreneurs, and they say, well, ransomware doesn't hit me because I have a small company. But these figures show that that they are wrong, basically. It proves the opposite. It's data from ransomware data leak sites. And the most targeted size of companies is between 11 and 200 employees. Small businesses of 1 to 10 persons actually appear on the list more often than the biggest enterprises, the ones with 5,000 plus employees, which probably makes sense because those really big corporations or companies protect themselves really well. But it proves the fact that even smaller and medium-sized businesses are targeted by ransomware gangs as well. Also, the first half of 2025, we've seen 3 trends that we'd actually like to point out. First, the gangs seem to be particularly bothered by EDR, endpoint detection and response tools, and they try to kill them. They try to destroy them because basically they're really annoying. They kill them using custom malware smuggled into the system via vulnerable drivers called EDR killers. Obviously, the name is self-explanatory, but second, we see legitimate RMM tools also serving a similar purpose, enabling the attackers to navigate and control the victim's environment. And the third one, which is really important as well, criminals are optimizing and or becoming lazier. It depends on how you look at this. Sometimes they don't even bother with encrypting the data that they come across. They just simply threaten to publish this data. And I think a great example, or not so great example, is the hack that we've seen at Clinical Diagnostics in the Netherlands. I'm sure everybody read about that one in the past couple of weeks, but that's a great example of this. They threaten just by publishing, or by threatening with publishing the data unless you pay. Last year, however, there was also some really, really good news, specifically 2 joint operations by law enforcement agencies and the private sector. They managed to take down 2 major players in the ransomware market, Lockbit and Black Cat. They both got taken down, seized, and perhaps destroyed. But ransomware gangs, as we know, are known for their bragging. So as expected, after these takedowns, they were like, meh, not so much, not a big deal, we can handle this. But the truth is that both of these gangs, they completely lost the trust of their affiliates, their customers basically. And without that trust, they have no business. And that's what this figure shows. The gap left behind by Lockbit and Black Cat actually got filled with someone else, and that's the entrance of RansomHub. They entered the stage. RansomHub experienced explosive growth, which you can see here. It's the white line throughout 2024, and most of Lockbit's and Black Cat's former affiliates turned to their services. This was helped by really favorable conditions because the affiliates could keep up to 90% of the ransoms they collected. They also really provided affiliates with continually improved EDR, helping them in destroying EDR basically, as part of their package, which was not like a common offering these other gangs used. And the numbers speak for themselves. Within a year, RansomHub claimed 100 of victims, and much like Lockbit had in their heydays, in their prime days. Around the same time, however, we see another one entering the stage, Dragon Force. They emerged on the scene, and if you're not familiar with this gang, they're the troublemakers responsible for attacking several organizations in the UK, like Marks and Spencer and Co-op, and leaving these stores with empty shelves for weeks. And they were really struggling to return to normal operations, and they're still struggling with returning to those normal operations today. They also have one unusual characteristic. Aside from their extreme arrogance, they have no problem attacking their competition. In March, they launched attacks on and defaced the leak sites of the Blacklock and Mamona ransomware groups, and eventually they even dared to go after the market leader, RansomHub. Well, Dragon Force tried to convince everyone that RansomHub had gone down willingly and was now working for their cartel. So at this point, Dragon Force is basically, well, ransomware of RansomHub, they're actually part of our group, and the heated exchanges and declarations of war between the two on their dark web forums, well, that actually tells us quite a different story. The fact remains that RansomHub in general has not recovered after the blow. I want to move on to something else, a party that we've had in the Hague this summer. We've had the NATO Summit, which has been a real honor because for the first time since 1949, the summit took place in the Netherlands. 1949 obviously being the year of birth of NATO. And we had to organize the NATO Summit. And to make this a success, our country pulled out all stops to keep this event safe. It was the largest logistics and security operations our country had ever seen. It was called Operation Orange Shield. There were 45 defense ministers coming to our country, 45 foreign ministers, world leaders, 6,000 delegates, 2,000 journalists, and we had to keep everybody safe, right? So roads were closed, the airspace above The Hague had been closed down, anti-aircraft systems popped up in sports fields, which was interesting to see. But that's the hard part of it, or perhaps the easy part of it, because we all know that the cyber battlefield doesn't actually show all these lines that you see over here. These are the borders that you see within our world, but cybercrime and digital warfare know no borders. So no walls, no checkpoints, no passports, and we already know that APTs from China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, what they are capable of. They are sophisticated, persistent, and often invisible, lurking from the shadows and operating from the shadows, and they don't care about these borders. They can attack us where they feel fit, or try to attack us. So one of those is Russia, for instance, and this is Sandworm, one of their most notorious APT groups. And they're known for their incredible sophisticated attacks on the Ukrainian energy sector in 2015, 2016, and during the war in Ukraine. So we know that what they're capable of, and we know that they are interested in disturbing anything around NATO. But then there's also these hacktivist groups that appear to be linked to the GRU, like the Secret Service in Russia, and to its APT group, Sandworm and Fancy Bear. In the past, we've seen them do a lot of hack and leak systems operations, where we saw Sandworm deploy wipers against an organization, but only after stealing their data and leaking it on the Telegram channels of these hacktivist groups. So they work together, right? So that's Russia. But we also have China. And we're tracking dozens of groups attributed to China. And yeah, it's a really huge, diverse ecosystem. And they're really highly sophisticated as well. They also have an interest in NATO summits. So what could these groups do? Well, large events, they are always a target, as we've seen in the past. APT, state-sponsored hackers, or hacktivist groups all want to target these events. We've seen NATO Summit in Vilnius. We've seen phishing campaigns over there, disinformation campaigns against Ukraine. We've seen pro-Russian messages on digital billboards and large numbers of attacks around the Olympics in Paris. North Korea also attacked the Olympics in South Korea. Basically, all these events give hackers a massive target. So if you know this, then it's really important to keep our country safe, right? So we know that our National Cybersecurity Center is doing an awesome job. They really did everything they could to keep our country safe. The municipality of The Hague really prepared as well. They together they did an awesome job at building all these plans on what could happen, scenarios basically on what hackers might do to the Netherlands. But they also reached out to the private sector and ESET as well, together with all these awesome other colleagues of us. We basically set up an ad hoc meeting, and during one of those meetings, a couple of these parties said, well, they raised their hands and said, well, let's come together and share our knowledge, share our information. And let's be ready to scale up in the event of a large-scale cyber attack, so we can work together with NCSC, work together with Europol, you work together with the national police, because the groups attacking our country are really sophisticated, and they're so sophisticated that without cooperation, it's really, really difficult. So it began. We set up a summit war room at our office in Sliedrecht, and for 3 days, from the 23rd of June up until the 25th of June, 17 private companies came together physically, while others joined as well online, joined by the police, Europol, and the municipality of The Hague. And well, you can see us, everybody here, smiling, still smiling, but it was actually quite boring, because nothing really intense happened. But the good thing is, it was really important to get together and get to talk to one another and to be together and share our information without worrying about, okay, you're my competitor, do I want to share this information with you? Because it might be competitive, interesting information. Because at this point, we basically said, well, screw all that. We need to work together and share our intelligence and talk about what we see happening. And that's basically what we did. Because there's a similarity between of the blind man and the elephant. This illustrates how limited perspectives can lead to incomplete or even contradictory understandings of what's happening. So there's one person saying, well, I see a rope. Well, it's actually the tail of an elephant. And one person says, well, it's a tree. Or one says it's a spear, well, it's actually the tusk of the elephant. But if those people get together and talk about what they see and zoom out, then they can see, well, it's actually a really big gray elephant. And that's actually what happened around the NATO Summit. So what we saw was many DDoS attacks, fake NATO domains and websites for possible phishing attacks, or to spread misinformation. Basically a minimal nuisance, and all part of the things that we expected to see, the things that got written down in the predictions that we made. There was DDoS attack protection, and basically if this DDoS protection hadn't been around in preparation for the NATO Summit, sites targeted could have been or would have been offline. And that's why, for example, 92929292 OV was also attacked, and Ziggo, but it's unclear whether it really was an attack. What you saw during the summit was actually No Name 057, one of the hacktivist groups from Russia, targeting us, and they were saying everything got taken down. But what actually happened, the targets that they targeted with these DDoS attacks weren't offline. They just couldn't reach them because they were connecting from a Russian IP address, which was quite funny. I would say that this is a playbook for future events. The way we work together, nothing really bad happened as far as we know. I mean, it could be that there were really sophisticated APTs that did stuff that we do not know about right now. But during NATO Summit, we didn't see anything really interesting. But the question is, was it preparation or because the attacks were simply not that interesting. And I think it's a combination of both. But what the Netherlands can learn from this collaboration and what lessons can be drawn for future large-scale events and other private projects is that this use case of getting together in the physical room and setting aside our competitor mindset really helps keeping us safe and guarding us for events where a sophisticated APT group targets our country. And it's not the first time that we do these type of things, because there's actually, is it for me? Let's see. Yeah, I'm over time. Okay. We see more collaborations like this. Project Melissa, where public and private companies work together to go after ransomware gangs and to really mess with the infrastructure that these ransomware gangs use. And it's because the complexity of modern ransomware, and this is a great quote from Bibi van den Berg, she's a great professor, really good, but it's become so complex that it's impossible to take down these ransomware gangs just by yourself. That's why we have to collaborate, we have to work together. And that's probably the main message in this talk. And I'm probably going to have to skip a couple of the slides because of my technical difficulties, but the lessons learned is that we really need to work together between different sectors. Operation Endgame is proof that this works. It's a collaboration between Dutch law enforcement and agencies from over 13 other countries. And under that banner, numerous actions were carried out to take down the infrastructure used by ransomware criminals. Operation Magnus, another one, where we took down two notorious Infostealers called Redline and Lumma Stealer. Yeah, I'm just going to skip this part. Sorry guys about this. The main message is that if we look at the NATO Summit and the takedowns of all these really large criminal groups that work together, the criminal groups working together against those criminal groups and working together to keep the NATO Summit safe really showed us that it's a real plus to work together. And I'm basically thinking that this is the main message for today, and even for this event in general, that we just need to be able to collaborate and find out how we can do that more often. And that's the only way forward, I think, to a safer world in general and a safer country in the Netherlands. This is not the end that I really wanted to get to, but this is the main takeaway. Let's work together more often to keep our country safe. Yeah? Thank you very much.